Hi everybody, Chip Paul here to talk to you guys a little bit about red light therapy, which is what I'm sitting under right now. Red light therapy is really good for cells. So let's talk through kind of what goes on in red light therapy and what it's all about. First of all, to give you guys some background, a little bit of background about what red light is and why it's important. So all energy comes to us from the sun, okay, and other stars, but energy isn't made by that nuclear power plant down the street or by the the electric plant that's around the corner. Energy is made and basically created by the sun. And energy comes to us through electrons and protons and energetic particles, and we use those energetic particles to do all kinds of things. So when the nuclear power plant or the power plant around the corner from you is just really altering electricity, it's not creating electricity. Only God can do that. And let's say us in certain circumstances, but it's difficult to do. So anyway, energy comes to us from the sun. We here on earth alter that energy, and in our arrogance we think that we create it somehow, but it doesn't work that way. So energy comes to us from the sun through God, and that energy impacts us, and we use that energy in useful ways. So you actually use energy from the sun every day in your body. That's like a big antenna, and you do all kinds of cool stuff with that energy. It pings around inside of you. But how does that energy correspond, let's say, to how we alter energy and kind of create energy inside of ourselves with mitochondria? So again, energy is just altered inside of us, but it's sort of pulled from this energetic resources from the sun, and we use it to create energy. So that's done in our mitochondria through something called ATP. So we build bonds. We actually start with something called adenosine monophosphate, and we build bonds into that. So we actually take that from a single bond to a triple bond into something called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And ATP is how we store energy. That's like our big battery. So we'll use ATP to increase C-amp in a cell, which means we're basically using ATP to increase energy in a cell. Okay, so all that super duper important. Well, how is ATP created? That is also super important. If you're a plant, it's from red light. It's from light from the sun. And again, light from the sun will come in this huge spectrum. We only see a small amount of that spectrum, and that's called the ultraviolet spectrum. That is light we can see. And again, it's just a small spectrum of this bigger spectrum. But red light is in this because we can see red light, right? So you can see how this light is altering, my look and shining on me, and how it's basically looks different. So we can see that, right? If I beam cell phone radiation at you, again, we can't see that. Still in the spectrum, still in the sun spectrum, let's say, but we can't see it because it's outside of what we can see. So UV is what we can see, ultraviolet light, and let's say UV 400 nanometer to UV 800 nanometer is basically what we can see, something like that. Don't hold me to that if I'm wrong, but it's somewhere around there. Anything more than like UV 800 nanometers gets up into the infrared and near infrared light. So the closer, basically, red is in a wavelength. So, and I think it's around 800. I should have looked probably before I did this video, but it's in a wavelength. Then past red, so if you get higher wavelengths, longer wavelengths, then that gets into the near infrared, and that goes up into the thousands, so 1500, 2000 nanometers or so near infrared. But then below that, so you get to red, and then you get to all the colors. So there's 7 chromatic colors that are associated with light in every octave, but in visual light, there'll be 7 colors. So blue is the most intense, and red is kind of the least intense. So red is on the lesser end of the spectrum, and blue is on the stronger end of the spectrum, okay? So what's beaming at me right now is not the entire spectrum. You can do that, so you can get the entire spectrum of, let's say, incandescent light with the old incandescent light bulbs, and there's, you can get the whole spectrum, let's say. This is just certain frequencies of red light, and I'll talk to you about why that's important here in just a second. But anyway, all red light will provide energy to mitochondria, all right? So if I beam light at certain frequencies onto cells and onto cell structures, then it will activate those cell structures. They'll get more energetic. But I've got to get the frequencies just right. If I don't get the frequencies just right, then they'll ho-hum. They won't even pay attention to the energy. How does all that work? Light, electron shells, length of bandwidth, all that stuff. But let's say, some structures want to interface with light and they want to sort of grab light, do things to it, use it to do whatever they're trying to do, and then pass it along. So you have many structures inside of you that do this, and you have many structures inside of mitochondria which do this. Mitochondria are what produce our energy. So like if you have a cell that's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's likely either resource depleted or has something going on with its mitochondria. Its mitochondria are, need something, want something, or, are not functioning the way they should be for some reason. So cells are pretty simple critters. I mean, they can do some advanced stuff, but they're pretty simple once you understand what they want and need. And they like light. So they like to use light as either a frequency of electrons. The interesting thing about light, and this is where it gets a little weird and, woohoo-ish and oogly and hard to understand. But if I have an electron just sitting there, let's say this electron is associated with a hydrogen atom, okay? So I have a hydrogen atom and one electron whoop, 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 circling around. Well, I can energize that whole structure with light. So if I hit it with a frequency of light that is less than, let's say, the energy needed to move that electron up to the next shell, then that electron will move up to the next shell, and that structure will become more reactive. So it'll bond easier to stuff, it'll be more energetic, and it'll be more reactive, okay? So it'll be more alive, let's say. Boop, all I gotta do is just hit it with light, enough light to energize that electron to get it to move up. When he moves down in the shell, that same structure, whoop, will give off light. So electrons kind of go this way, and photons kind of go this way, but they're kind of the same thing. You can think of them as kind of the same thing. So, you could kind of think of, I'm beaming these photons on me and they're hitting basically chemical structures. And if the bandwidth is right, they're going to excite those chemical structures and stuff is going to start happening. So a way to look at this is you have all this stuff inside of you. You have something inside of you called cytochrome P450. And cytochrome P450 is a protein complex that will respond to 450 nanometers of light, which is, I think, somewhere in the blue, maybe green. Again, I should have had brought in my little thing, but it's in the visible light spectrum, let's say, so 450 nanometers of light. You have this whole structure inside of you that helps you get rid of and basically deal with things that, you've learned to deal with over the years. So if you eat plastic, there's going to be a cytochrome expression that helps you deal with plastic, believe it or not. So CYP something, 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 something. And again, those are driven by 450 nanometers of light energetically, which is cool. So all of those enzymes, if I hit that structure with 450 nanometers of light and I can get light to it, it's going to excite that structure. It's going to make that structure work better.